Remember when Frank Corrado used to play golf? Before the Twins.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, I used to play golf. Used to get outside. Used to be tanned. Maddie, how you looking these days? You're not feeling your skin complexion these days.
It's been a bad spring. Right now, I'm more English Scottish than I am Hungarian, but we'll get there.
All right,
Frankie,
we'll be monitoring things. We'll be monitoring your sun exposure.
Yes, in Vancouver. Frank Corrado, former Vancouver Canuck TSN hockey analyst. So we got some meat on the bone today.
It's June 19th, and our Hockey News Cup runneth over, Frank. That's where we are at this stage in the game here.
So we'll start with Philip Hronek. What did you make of the deal for the Canucks and for the player?
Okay. Given the circumstances, and the circumstances being strong arbitration case, good partner for Quinn Hughes, 26 years old, right-hand defenseman who plays in all situations. Given all the circumstances, I don't mind the deal. If I'm speaking like preference, my preference would have been to get it done for under $7 million. Especially, when you hear about, and it's going to be different ages, but you hear about certain players like Slavin is going to sign an extension with Carolina. It's a very different player, but that's going to be in the sixes. There's going to be some players that are UFAs that are going to have the same type of impact as Philip Hronek does in Vancouver. They're going to sign in the fives and the sixes, but he's 26 years old. He had a strong case, and at some point, you have to make a decision. Do you want good players that fit on your team, or do you just want to let young guys walk and take your chances elsewhere and have a lot of turnover? So I guess with everything considered, I don't mind it. I'm happy it's not higher. Like, I'm happy it's not up near 8. I think that's crazy talk that was ever even a thing. So the cap's going to go up. He's got to show that he can play, well for more than half a season. At some point, like we've talked about a lot this year, he's going to have to play maybe on a different pairing and show that he can anchor that and run that pair and be the number one guy. All things considered, I don't mind it. I don't love it, but I understand why it happened and how it goes down that way.
So if it's at 6.9, you're doing cartwheels?
I think if it's like 6.75, I'm probably, doing cartwheels. I don't know. It's just something about it being in the sixes made more sense to me. But it still fits another it fits another thing. It's under Quinn Hughes, so check another box that it fits.
Let me just take you on Slavin and some of the other UFAs. They're 30.
Yes.
26.
Yes, for sure.
So you're paying for better years, conceivably. Right?
100%. I 100% agree. And the guys that are UFAs coming up are basically between 28 and 32, and it's very different. But now he's getting paid. Devon Taves, Morgan Riley, I don't know, all those guys that are in the $7 million range. So now the ball's in his court, and it's for 8 years, and be good. Like, be good for 8 years and make it worth the money, even though the cap is going to go up. Like, I don't know, make it worth it. The team has invested in this player now.
Yeah, that's it. Like he's paid, and I've seen this written that he's paid like a number one defenseman on a lot of teams, but he's paid like a number one defenseman in the first year of a significant cap jump and with future cap jumps to come. So the inflationary effect is there. Like, all number two defensemen are going to be in and around this number, I suspect, in short order.
Right. No? Quinn Hughes is going to be at 11. So, it's all going to slot in a little bit more logically in a couple of years.
One other thing on this too, like in the hard cap world that we live in, fans, media types, we get so invested in what is the number and how does that affect my team's salary cap structure. And for good reason, because we've been living in this flat cap world where, it seems like percentage of the cap never seems to go up, and all that kind of stuff is very prevalent. Now, at some point, an organization needs to decide, we want good players here. We have to pay good players. So that is I guess that's the baseline for what this is. It's like the organization has established that you're a good player for the team. Now you have to continue being that player. But it sucks when organizations go spend, a million and a half on defensemen. You know why? Because they're not any good. They're down at the bottom of the standing. So if your team has a chance to spend this kind of money on a player that they deem good and was, the evidence was there this season, these are kind of like first world problems of the NHL. Like, it's not a gross overpayment. And to me, it's a good thing, because now, you basically have, you have a team that's investing money in players that you should eat up great years and should lead to the team being good. Like, all this stuff should add up to the Canucks being competitive for a longer period of time, or at least hopefully the duration of this 8-year deal.
What's the next big investment from the Vancouver Canucks now in the wake of this? They have the cost certainty of Hronek. They have to write another big check. It's either to, and unless they get really creative, it's either to Nikita Zadorov, to Jake Guentzel, or maybe they go out and they flesh out the right side of the defense and get another defenseman. I suppose that seems to be the longest odds at this point. But I guess you could throw in one of the tier 2 wingers as well, a DeBrusk or a Teravainen or something like that. But where's the next big investment? Where should the next big investment be for the Vancouver Canucks?
Could it be, if it was going to be Jake Guentzel, I wouldn't be upset about that. And we talked about that last week. All the things, familiarity with everyone involved, gifted goal scorer, plays well in the playoffs, a winger to play with Pettersson. And then if that led you down to a road where you can no longer sign Nikita Zadorov, you take a look at the list and you say, okay, who is built like Nikita Zadorov? Maybe not the same player, because he's pretty good. Like, and what is he? He's a middle guy, let's say. Like if everything goes well, he's, he could play on your second pair, but if your D core is really good, he's probably on your third pair. So who is the poor man's version of Nikita Zadorov? Is it Joel Edmondson? And can you have him for, $1.75? Can you have him for $2 million? Like, is that how you structure things? Where you still get
Brendan Dillon as an option as well.
Yeah, like where you still get the big defenseman that Rick Tocchet wants and basically needs to have in order for his team to be successful, which is fair. Like, he's identified those guys. So that's kind of like, if you're asking me, I'll put more money in the gifted goal scorer, the more talented player, and I'll try and find a value deal on the big, rugged, brute defenseman on someone else, whether it is Dillon, like you say, who will probably cost a little more than Joel Edmondson, or, Joel Edmondson, who was making 1.75 last year. Like, that would be my list of priorities as far as how that sequence would break down.
I hear you. You played with Guentzel in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Tell us about the guy. What's he like? And then I'd love your scouting report on him.
He's awesome. He's a great guy. Very energetic, bubbly personality, personable guy. Like, he's going to fit in on any locker room in the league. He's going to be a very popular guy. And there's just something about, like, he loves hockey. Like, he's like not a hockey nerd. I don't want to call anyone a nerd, but he is like a hockey nerd. And he used to joke around with me a little bit after practice, because we would do our D drills, and when we would do our split. So I don't know if anyone doesn't know what a split is. It's like the D are at one end doing some D drills. The forwards are at one end doing their forward drills. For some reason, our D drills always finished first, and the forwards were still doing their stuff. I don't know. I would go down and do some stuff with the forwards, just have a little fun, work on something different. And for some reason, we'd end up doing this like one-timer at the side of the net, like a complete, power play, goal scorers kind of drill. And I'd be down there, one knee down, Steven Stamkos, like top shelf. And he'd always give me shit. He'd be like, "Oh, there you are, buddy, right in your office, right where you're going to be." Like, so he's that kind of guy. Like, he's quick-witted, and he's he's a really fun guy to be around.
Did you take one goal line one-timer in your NHL?
I don't even think I took one in my entire hockey career. Oh, like, that's minor hockey, OHL, summer league, 3-on-3 summer league, like charity games. There was not one ever. Yeah, but I was in my office practicing it when I was playing for the Penguins.
Help me out on this. How do you think a $9 million plus contract will age with a guy who will be 30?
Right. That was my next question.
That's
this deal?
yeah.
How does his skill set age?
Okay. I don't think Jake Guentzel was or is the fastest player. When I played with him, I never found him to be, a player with blazing speed. So I don't think like the legs are going to significantly fall off, and that's going to be catastrophic for him. Like I think his speed is his speed, whereas someone like Mikheyev, very different player, obviously, but when the legs fell off, that's it. Like that's what he had. So that's not going to be an issue for him. He's a shooter. Like his game has always been based around how do I get my shot off? How do I kind of think about getting into positions to get my shot off? So as long as you're playing with someone who can distribute the puck and someone who can find you, and an offensive zone kind of scheme that finds quiet areas of the ice, you should be fine. And at least that's probably, listen, if there's going to be term attached to this contract, I would imagine that's the case for half the contract. There's half of that contract that I wouldn't really even be afraid of. And I think there's a good example this year is what Steven Stamkos was able to do. Different players, different ways they attack the game. But Stamkos is 34, and he just had a point per game season where he scored 40 goals, and he's been often injured, and Jake Guentzel has not really been he hasn't been injured to the extent that Steven Stamkos has been. So I don't worry about it, especially in if it's a 7-year deal, which would be a long time, years 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't worry about it. And I think for the Canucks, it's like they're trying to be good now. So you're trying to catch that lightning in a bottle and see if you can grab the last 4 to 5 years of Jake Guentzel's, high productivity.
He's not an all situation swinger. He doesn't kill penalties. How is he defensively? Is he a guy that protects leads late?
I think he's fine defensively. The thing is, like, he's played with Sid so much in his career. So I don't necessarily, I don't remember Jake ever being a liability. Like I never, even watching the Penguins when I was with Wilkes-Barre or whatever, I would watch every Penguins game. Like I never thought of Jake as, oh, we're down into the last 5 minutes, so now Sid's going on the ice and Jake can't go with him. Like Jake would go. He would always play in those situations. And I think that the beautiful thing about the Penguins when they were really good is the players on the third and fourth line, their roles were to kill the penalties, whether it was Rust or Rowney or Cullen or Bonino. So was Jake Guentzel just going to kill penalties just for the sake of killing penalties? Or were you going to have the guys that were a little more suited to do it, because the roster was built that way? That doesn't necessarily mean he's a defensive minded forward or he's going to start killing penalties, but I do think he's not a liability the way some, super one-dimensional guys are. And, I feel like that is even dwindling a little bit because I think it's too competitive now. The guys that are really one-dimensional, they better be very, very good at that one dimension or ice time seems to shrink up on them.
Back to the speed element for a second. Devil's advocate here. Alvin all talked about the need to want to get faster for next season. Guentzel's he's faster than Besser, but he's not a Blazer, as we talked about. Does that concern you? You're investing this much and you haven't yet solved the winger speed issue, which is certainly a concern for the Canucks because they are not a fast team.
Not really, because I think if you're just going to sign guys that skate faster, I think you can find those guys on lower cap crunch AAVs, lower in your lineup.
Have them as the hustle forecheck guys, and then have these guys.
Yeah, you'll find those guys that just kind of buzz around. Like I don't know, take your pick. Like there's let's say the Tyler Motts of the world who skate fast and get in on the forecheck. Who you know what that kind of game is. You'll get some speed that way. The other thing is if he's going to be playing with Pettersson, let's say, it doesn't make sense to have a guy who skates 1,000,000 miles an hour playing with Pettersson, where they're not are they ever going to be like on the same length of making a lateral pass. You know what I mean? So having someone who moves in that kind of speed, and we're not talking about slugs.
No,
We're just talking about guys that aren't the fastest players on the ice. And to be honest with you, your best plays are kind of made at that like 80% speed range. So that's like, I don't see an issue with that because I think both those guys will play at the same kind of pace if they were to play together.
McDavid and McKinnon are the only guys that can make the plays at their top speed, and that's why they're so special.
Would hold on? Would McDavid and McKinnon even work together? Like would it like if they played on the same line?
If only
would that work?
Yeah, sure McKinnon could hack the wing. Let me just ask you this: from the Alain Vigneault school of Burrows gets the Twins playing with better pace. Would a winger not get Pettersson playing with better pace?
So who's your third winger? Like
good question. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. It seems Sedin took a few of those spots, right?
That's right.
So there was two Sedins, you know, who were, and then there was Burrows, and then there was, I don't know, like I played at a time when Cassian got a run playing with the Sedins. Like there was always, you know.
Let's say
Burrows was the guy. Sake, yeah.
Let's say it's Garland. For argument's sake.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Like, is he not?
I just, you know, Alvin talking about how he needs, name checking speed is one thing that he wants to add. And of course, we know Elias isn't the fastest. Brock plays with JT. So, I've just found myself wondering, like, does the same logic apply to Elias that applied for the Twins all those years ago with Burrows, right? That gets him playing with a little bit more pace. Can still do the half court thing, once you get your controlled zone entry. But, because that's the other thing. Tockett's looking and doing a deep dive, he tells us, this summer in terms of how to generate more rush chances. And so, following up on Blake's question, I'm just wondering, does the speedy winger not achieve the more rush chances? Does it get Elias playing with more pace? Is that really what he needs to unlock him a little further?
It's not a bad thing to have that one guy who can buzz around. Like he still needs to be able to play with the puck. Like he can't be playing with the butt end of his stick. Like that's still going to be more important. But having a guy on, like if you had a guy on every line who was the faster guy, who was a little more of the grunt work guy. Like it's the reason why Zach Hyman worked so well with Matthews and he works so well with McDavid and guys like a guy like that works well with star players because it's not really pretty what he does, but gets in on the forecheck, beats out icings, kind of like is willing to go from corner to corner, kind of willing to be the guy going a back check first. Like that guy. And Zach Hyman is not available. And I don't even know what the poor man's version of that would be this year. But there's a lot of value to that. I kind of wonder about a guy like, and we were talking about UFAs last week, and we talked about Teravainen, we talked about Arvidsson, and who was the other guy we talked about? I think there was three guys. Jake DeBrusk. Like our Arvidsson he's making something in the fours this year. Like if there was any world where you could grab that guy for, and this is probably crazy talk, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If you could grab him at a cap hit, I don't know, we'll call it $3 million. Is that not a guy that you think, even though he's a little older on a shorter term deal, can he buzz around? Can he be that little bit of a, an energizer? So maybe in that situation, like I think that was the one I kind of poured cold water on last week because we were talking about them as an individual, but maybe placed in that role, that's the one that kind of makes sense. There is something to be said for having that kind of player playing with skilled guys.
Yeah, and like the debate that Blake and I have been having this week is it Guentzel, or you're better off spending $9 million on a $6 million winger and a $3 million winger and sort of rounding out your top nine a little better.
No one will ever say that they didn't try if you sign Jake Guentzel and get a fair market deal, let's say. Like no one can ever accuse the Canucks of saying, oh, they held money back and they weren't really all in. Like that's, I don't know, all these kinds of things. re-signing Pettersson to the cap hit you sign him at, re-signing Hronek. All these things kind of signify we're in this and we're serious about being not only the best team in the Pacific, but trying to push for a Stanley Cup, which like you lost out to the Edmonton Oilers this year, and they're playing for the Stanley Cup now. So I mean, they're obviously on the right track given the way things went this year.
So the other question to ask yourself if you're the Canucks is, not only does he fit, not only should we devote that much of the salary cap to him, are we so hungry for him that we're going to peel off a pick to acquire the rights to talk to him before everybody else? It is a not often used route for teams because you get to chat with everybody right before the deadline anyway. But I guess if you can peel off a 4th round pick and sign the guy in 2 days, that's preferable. But is it worth it to you?
No, it's not. I think it's nice if you can get it done. I don't think that's something that needs to happen. Like, I'm not going to start any kind of like tampering thing here, but like put your objectively speaking glasses on, okay? All the players in the NHL are represented by, I don't know how many agents. Like, there's not a ton of agents.
No, of high-powered agents. No.
They're all talking to GMs every day. You don't think there's a little bit of like a check-in happening on each guy? Like, come on. So that's kind of, it would be, I don't know, unless you were gonna give up the pick and then completely overpay to get that guy because you didn't want him kind of going to market. I wouldn't be willing to do that. I'd kind of roll the dice a little bit. Not that it's even rolling the dice.
Last question. What do you make of the Markstrom trade?
Yeah. Another defenseman coming back to Calgary, Kevin Ball. He's big. The 1st round pick for Calgary is going to be good. They're going to like that. And New Jersey, which, I mean, it sounded like he was heading there at some point this year. It's a good return for Calgary. It makes sense for New Jersey because they lost so many games because of bad goaltending this year. And I just hope for New Jersey's sake, obviously, hopefully Hamilton can play because that's big for them. But I hope the age demographic of their young blue line matches up with what Markstrom can kind of bring to the table behind them, meaning they're young. Like Nemitz is young, Hughes is young. I can't remember who else is there, but like they've got some good young players. And that's not what's holding them back, but they could have used Severson this year. As much as Graves didn't have a good year in Pittsburgh, like they probably could have used 2 years ago Graves, and that would have helped them. Like ultimately, the goaltending was what killed them. But if Nemitz and Hughes and Hamilton is back, and those guys all take a step forward, they have the makings of a team that should be good. And I'm very intrigued by them because Sheldon Keefe knows how to coach skilled players, especially in the regular season. He's coached Matthews, Marner, Nylander, all 2 career years. So that'll be interesting to see how he does that with Bratt and Hughes and the rest of that supporting cast there. Sheldon Keefe hasn't really had a goaltender like Jacob Markstrom as an NHL coach.
No.
Like he had Freddie Anderson towards, Freddie was struggling to stay healthy, let's say. Then he has Jack Campbell. He's got Samsonov, Joseph Wall. Like, I'm so interested to see how a Sheldon Keefe run team with the ponies that Sheldon Keefe knows how to run operates with a goalie that can be a Vezina caliber goaltender. Like that's
a good team.
I find it very intriguing.
Yeah. And you know what? Calgary could have, you want to believe if you're Calgary that you get more. But honestly, there's a world if Dustin Wolf makes the step, and let's face it, he's graduated from the AHL, like 930 save percentage of plenty at the AHL level. If he makes the step, I don't know that they are that worse of a team defending, especially with Kevin Ball added. Like there's a world in which they got a free 1st round pick here, and they don't get demonstrably worse, if at all.
And where's Calgary going this year?
Yeah, exactly.
They're in that middle. They're in that middle ground because they have too many players tied up to long contracts that are aging, but they're not going to be able to get rid of them. So they really can't start the full youth movement yet. So they're kind of starting that youth movement on the back end with the guys that they brought in, whether it was Miramanov, who's actually a little bit older, Grushnikov, who they got for Tanev. Now they got Kevin Ball. So they're starting to build this kind of younger, bigger decor. And like Calgary is going to be in that weird, 11th place, 10th place. I don't know. So did you need Jacob Markstrom to achieve that this year? No. So you got a first round pick and you got an NHL defenseman, a young NHL defenseman who happens to be a tree. So I think that's a pretty good return if you're Craig Conroy.
Glad you're one of our ponies, Frank Corrado.
Never a thoroughbred, but always appreciated.
Good pony.
I'm not so sure about that. Good luck to your Italians.
Yes. Thank you. Grazie. Forza. See you, boys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.